What's up, YouTube? This is 82 and 0. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about Frank Ramsey, the Kentucky Colonel, as he was nicknamed. Now, he was born July 13th, 1931, in Cordon, Kentucky. He went to high school in Madisonville, Kentucky. One thing you got to know is back then, baseball was a much more popular sport. And growing up, Frank Ramsey actually wanted to be a baseball player, but he was better at basketball. So when he went to the University of Kentucky, he played basketball. Now, he played under the legendary Adolph Rupp, and he actually had some pretty good teammates, Cliff Hagan, a few other guys. But what hurt the team was they were, although in 1951 he helped the Wildcats win an NCAA championship with a 68-58 win over Kansas State Jayhawks. The following year, in 1952, they were involved in a point shaving scandal. And this was the first team to receive the death penalty. What the death penalty means is a team was barred from playing for a year because of a year or more for something they did that was against the rules. Now, Frank Ramsey himself wasn't involved in the point shaving, but it is a team sport, so you're going to have to suffer the consequences. Now, Ramsey graduated from Kentucky in 1953, and he became eligible for the draft. So he was drafted to the Boston Celtics. Now, the thing about the Celtics, they took him with the sixth pick in 1953. He wouldn't actually get to play until the 54 or 55 season, however. And a thing about the Celtics back then, they weren't the championship level team yet. They had guys like Bill Sharman, Bob Cousy, Togo Palazzi. They were a good team, but they weren't a championship level team yet. They didn't have Bill Russell yet. So anyways, he wanted to graduate college. That's why he didn't immediately go there. He waited one season before going to the NBA. Now, after finishing the regular season, one in which Ramsey averaged 19.6 points per game with a perfect 25-0 record and number one ranking in the Associated Press, Kentucky had been offered a bid into the NCAA tournament. But the rules in the NCAA prohibit students from participating in postseason play. The Wildcats declined the bid because their participation would have forced them to play without Ramsey and Hagan, thus jeopardizing their perfect season. So they were graduated, but they couldn't play in the tournament. So it's kind of weird how that worked out. But so he plays his rookie season with the Boston Celtics. He puts up 11.2 points per game, and the Celtics lose in the second round to Syracuse. However, the following season would be his military service. So he didn't play the 55-56 season. However, he would return in the 56-57 season. I think he would return towards the tail end of the season. Anyways, he played 35 games that year, putting up 11.9 points per game. Pretty similar to his previous year. But what's different is the Celtics team now has Bill Russell. And that's what they needed. Celtics needed defense. So look at it like this, right? The year prior, in 55-56, there were 8 teams then. They went from the 6th best defense to the number 1 rated defense. That's how good of an impact Bill Russell had. And Frank Ramsey was the first six-man role. Arbach called him his sixth starter. So he would come off the bench for Bill Sharman and Bob Cousy, the guards, and just torch the opposition's second unit. They defeat the St. Louis Hawks in 7 games. The Celtics won 125 to 123, and this is probably one of the greatest NBA games of all time. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of footage of this. Yeah, it went into 2 overtimes. It's the only NBA Finals to ever go into 2 overtimes, and they just narrowly won. Frank Ramsey himself would have 16 points in that. Now, going into the late 50s and early 60s, Frank Ramsey would continue his role. And he would go on to win 7 championships with them. He was never an all-star. I mean, he was voted into the Hall of Fame as a player in 1982. But, one thing that I think made him special was the season prior to his final season, 62-63, they had a new kid, John Havlicek. And Frank Ramsey really taught him how to do that six-man role. And in my opinion, the 62-63 Celtics weren't their best team, but it was their deepest because they had Sam Jones, Tom Heinsohn, Bill Russell, John Havlicek, Bob Cousy, Frank Ramsey, Tom Sanders, Casey Jones, Clyde Leveillette, Jim Luskatoff. Super deep team. But I think, part of the reason why Ramsey retired, because he did retire kind of early, Guys back then didn't play as long. But he retired at the age of 32, and he would go on to be a coach. But I think part of the reason why he retired is a lot of players back then, the game was a lot more physical and hard on your bodies. Like Bill Russell kind of talked about this a little bit. The arthritis in his knees and how painful it was. But, that's just a theory of mine. But Ramsey was also a coach for one season in the ABA. He coached his home state, Kentucky Colonels, who were led by 2 former Kentucky Wildcats, which was Dan Issel, and Louis Dampier. Ramsey was named coach 17 games into the 84-game season, which, the ABA, they played 84 games instead of 82. He wasn't, he didn't really get a chance to show his coaching skills, but prior to coaching the ABA, Ramsey had been Red Auerbach's first choice to replace his mentor. So, think about how different that would have been if the Celtics had Frank Ramsey as their coach in the late 60s rather than Bill Russell as his replacement. We all know it would end up being Bill Russell as his replacement coach, but Frank Ramsey and Tom Heinsohn were 2 of his picks initially. And Ramsey was one of the Celtics' best players. And I think coming off the bench, a lot of people, it's very similar to Manu Ginobili in that you don't really see how good he is because his numbers hold him back. You just see like 11 to 14 points, and you don't realize that these 6 men are very capable. These great 6 men are very capable of being an all-star in their own right. Look at Manu Ginobili. And like I said, he impacted Havlicek, who was a great 6-man in the later 60s. Guys like Kevin McHale and Bill Walton later on the Celtics. So, and he went on to be a president of a bank, actually, after he retired from the NBA and basketball in general. And I think that was in 2008 that he would retire altogether from work. Like he would retire from that bank. But anyways, Ramsey died of natural causes in his hometown in Madisonville, Kentucky on July 8th, 2018. He was 86 years old. And like I said, Ramsey's number 30 is retired by the University of Kentucky's Wildcats. Ramsey's number 23 jersey is retired by the Boston Celtics. Ramsey was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame in 1982. In 2005, he was inducted into the University of Kentucky Athletic Hall of Fame. In 2006, Ramsey was a charter inductee in the College Basketball Hall of Fame. Now let's talk about his career stats. He played with the Boston Celtics his whole career, like I said. His career stats are 13.4 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, and 1.8 assists. He averaged 39% field goal shooting, and he was crucial in these Boston Celtics championships. These first few ones. And, even as a sixth man, he would have some games, for example, where he'd get as high as 38 points. That's his career high. He would have games where he'd get up to 30, 25. One player that comes to mind is Vinnie Johnson for the Detroit Pistons in the 80s. Someone who would just come out and give you instant offense. And Frank Ramsey was a marksman with his shots. I know the field goal percentages were a little lower with some guards back then. Well, heck, even some centers it was lower. But I think if you put him in today's era, his what was his career high in field goal shoot? 42%. I think he'd shoot more around 46, 47%. And I think another reason, kind of like with Tom Heinsohn, why Frank Ramsey's field goal percentage was so low is he took a lot of crazy outside shots. And that's just my theory. So, what are your thoughts down below? Thanks for watching.